Mr. Speaker, the legislation before the House this afternoon, H.R. 1256, the Swap Jurisdiction Certainty Act, is a bipartisan response to what many view to be, frankly, regulatory red tape overreach and the adverse consequences that it can have on the millions of our fellow countrymen who are either unemployed or underemployed. The impact that it could have on the competitiveness of our U.S. employers and job creators. Mr. Speaker, I need not tell anyone in this body that we are regrettably and continue to be in the middle of a non-recovery recovery. If it wasn't for the fact that so many people have actually left the job force, the working participation rate, our unemployment rate would be even higher. Many have just given up. We know that for many, even though America has in the past produced 3.5% economic growth and is probably capable of 4 or 5% economic growth with the right economic policies, regrettably we find ourselves mired in 1.5% to 2% GDP growth, which means, Mr. Speaker, a lot of American dreams go unfulfilled, and a lot of our constituents lay awake at night wondering how are they going to pay the bills. So, Mr. Speaker, jobs continue to be job number one, I believe, of the United States House of Representatives. But regrettably, those who create jobs, those who employ our constituents, are drowning in a sea of red tape. There has been an over 50% increase of the Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Will members please take their conversations off of the House floor? Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, there has been over 50% increase in regulations under the Obama administration. We know that is directly correlated to the lackluster economic growth that we see in the nation today. I still vividly remember that one small business person in East Texas came up to me at a small cabinetry shop, and even though it was still profitable, he shut it down. And he shut it down because of the red tape burden that crushed him and the jobs of 17 people who worked in East Texas. And he said, "Congressman, it got to the point where I just thought my federal government didn't want me to succeed." And so, Mr. Speaker, we always have to be vigilant in ensuring that the red tape burden doesn't strangle the jobs and hopes and aspirations of the American people. So that brings us to H.R. 1256, the Swap Jurisdiction Certainty Act. Now, many who may be tuning in this debate may not be quite familiar with the world of derivatives, but it's a way that many farmers, ranchers, manufacturers hedge risk in order to become successful companies and employ people and sell their goods and services at competitive prices. An outfit like John Deere will use a derivative. They may do an interest rate swap as they finance a tractor for some farmer in rural East Texas that I may represent. And so that derivative is directly linked to the cost and the availability of that tractor. And what we're trying to do with H.R. 1256 is make sure that those who are trying to access derivatives to hedge risk, to create and sustain jobs, don't automatically overnight have huge swaths of the global market pulled out from under them. Because if they do, all of a sudden, it could be that somebody can't finance that tractor anymore. Companies like Southwest Airlines that operate in my hometown of Dallas, Texas, they hedge their fuel cost. And if they can't access global markets, who knows about the success of their hedges? And then all of a sudden, the price of a trip for grandparents to fly in from Kansas City to see their grandkids in Dallas, Texas just became more prohibitive. It just became more expensive. An outfit like Coors, they'll hedge their aluminum cost through swaps, maybe their wheat cost through swaps. And I don't know about other members, but I represent a lot of hard-working people in the 5th District of Texas. And let me tell you, sometimes on a hot August afternoon, after working, putting in the 40 hours at the Pepsi bottling plant, or maybe putting it in at some of the other factories that we may have in Mesquite, somebody might just want to go to the 7-Eleven and buy a six-pack. And in America, that ought to be their right. And the inability to access global markets for swaps ultimately can actually inflate that cost. And that's not something I care to deny to hardworking Americans who want that. So this is a very simple and bipartisan bill. Mr. Speaker, this passed. We had a hearing in the Financial Services Committee. We had a markup in the Financial Services Committee. It passed with 100% of the Republican vote. It passed with almost 2/3 of the Democratic vote. You would think that we might be under the suspension calendar for this one, but in order to respect the wishes of the ranking member, we are having a more prolonged debate in addition to the one that we've already had in the committee. But, Mr. Speaker, ultimately this bill will do two things. It will tell the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, you need to issue one joint rule when it comes really to American end users being able to access global markets. Not one suggestion and one rule, two different rules. One rule. One rule. Let's take down a little complexity here. And Mr. Speaker, after Dodd-Frank, we're about to celebrate its 3rd anniversary next month. After 3 years of deliberating, maybe it's time to actually come out with a rule and create a little certainty for the people at Coors and at Southwest Airlines and at all the other employers in John Deere. Maybe it's time to create a little certainty. And so the bill says, okay, let's get this done in 9 months. You've had almost 3 years. It's time to get it done. And last but not least, it says, in order not to pull the rug out from under these people on day one, it says, you know what, the 9 largest markets, we are going to have a presumption that their regimes are broadly equivalent to the U.S. and not immediately deny access. Now, at any given time, if the CFTC and SEC come to the conclusion that these regimes are not broadly equivalent, that somehow they present risk to our economy, with the stroke of a pen, they can change that presumption, but not on day one. Not on day one, Mr. Speaker. So for the sake of economic growth, for the sake of jobs, to provide some certainty in a struggling economy, I would urge all of my colleagues to support this bipartisan legislation that was voice voted in the Ag Committee, voice voted, and had unanimous consent of all Republicans and almost 2/3 of the Democrats on the Financial Services Committee. I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 1256. I reserve the balance of my time.